Hey everyone, Casual Console Gamer here, and this video is going to be a little bit different. Rather than a standard review for a game that most gamers have already played, I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience with Elden Ring and the current state of the game in 2024. Elden Ring is From Software at its peak. From the combat to the exploration, it's a fantastic video game that everyone should experience. Is it perfect? No, but very rarely is anything truly perfect. Elden Ring is like a house or an apartment that seems perfect when you move in, but as you spend more time living there, you start to notice the flaws. The world is massive and it's an explorer's dream, but then you find out that a lot of the dungeons and side areas are copied and pasted environments with recycled bosses and enemies that reward you with too few ruins and equipment that you'll never really use. The lore of Elden Ring is rich and deep, but the story is told through item descriptions and confusing or easily missed dialogue from NPCs.
Ye dead, who yet live. The call of long-lost grace speaks to us all.
Before we talk about what Elden Ring does right and wrong, let's discuss the current technical state of the game. I played Elden Ring when it was first released in 2022 on the PlayStation 5, and from the technical side, it had a lot of FPS drops, network problems, and it crashed a few times. But for my most current playthrough, my second time, I played it on the Xbox Series X, and I'm happy to report the game is buttery smooth with no network issues and it didn't crash once. Let me be clear, this has nothing to do with the console I was playing on. The game has just been polished and patched to iron out all the problems it had at launch. It also looks a lot better in performance mode than I remember it being. The colors are more vibrant and the FPS is a rock solid 60 frames per second. I had no issue finding other players online, and the messages that people left telling me to jump to my death or they would lie to me about illusionary walls were liberally littered throughout the world. But I don't want to delve too deeply into Elden Ring's graphics, its gameplay, or even its story. This isn't really a review, considering that if you're watching this video, you likely have played this game before, or you heard enough about it in the past. This video is about my personal experience with Elden Ring and how I replayed it 2 years later to finally become the Elden Lord. When I played Elden Ring on the PlayStation 5 on release, I played it offline, which meant no messages on the ground or summons from other players. I was also determined to go into it blind, searching and exploring every inch of every area before checking a guide to make sure I didn't miss anything important in that area before moving on to the next. All that meant by the time that I made it to Lindell, the capital city, I was over 70 hours in and I was absolutely burnt out on it. I had conquered every demigod I could find, activated their ruins, and did all the NPC quests. Ranni's questline, Fia's questline, both of them brought me to locations I never would have found otherwise. Through my exploration, I was so overleveled that I didn't need to grind for ruins anymore and I could defeat every boss on the first try. But when I reached Lindell and saw that the map still had so much more to explore, I just gave up. The repetition of catacombs and castles, the endless items and equipment that were incompatible with my build, and the recycled enemies and bosses that gave too few ruins for me to care about them had made me put down my controller. Sure, the exploration is fantastic, but it does start to become too much. There's almost too much world to explore in Elden Ring, which is kind of a weird thing to say, but it has almost too many areas and too many people that keep track of other quest lines. It can be really difficult. So unfortunately, I turned off the game 2 years ago and I didn't pick it up again until now. I left my character to stagnate and the throne of Elden Lord remained empty on my PlayStation 5 playthrough. But then I got the game for free on Xbox Series X and I thought, you know what, I'm going to beat this game this time. And that's when I realized a second playthrough of Elden Ring is just as good as the first, only in a bit of a different way.
Don't worry, Torrent. Fortune is on his side.
My first playthrough of Elden Ring was about awe and adventure, exploration, and learning all the secrets of the lands between. It was also about hitting my head against the wall in an attempt to get good and defeat enemies that were way beyond my capabilities. But my second playthrough had a singular purpose, and that was to become the Elden Lord. Nothing else mattered. I didn't care about the other quest lines or endings, since I've already done the NPC quest lines, and the endings I'd already seen on YouTube anyway. I had fought and explored most of the bosses in the game one time already in my PlayStation 5 playthrough, plunged into the lowest parts of the world to the highest volcanic mountains. This playthrough on Xbox was about becoming the Elden Lord, and that's why I think the second playthrough of Elden Ring can be just as good as the first, only in a different way. You already know where you're going to go and what you need to do. There's no real secrets and no learning curve. You pick your destination and you just go there. But your second playthrough all starts with your build. Elden Ring has so many weapons and abilities, spells, and Ashes of War to use that builds become really important. It's something you don't realize on your first playthrough when you think you're going to do a strength build, and then you pick up an overpowered sword that needs faith, and suddenly you're doing something completely different than you had planned. On my second playthrough, I knew I needed vitality, endurance, strength, and dexterity, along with a sword that needed smithing stones to reach plus 25, and the Mimic Tier Ashes to reach plus 10. The benefits of knowing what you need and what you can ignore means that you can focus on the areas and bosses that give you exactly what you want and nothing else. One of the most disappointing things about my first playthrough that led to my burnout was going through a tough catacomb or cave, dying over and over again, only to come out with an item that I was never going to use and just a paltry amount of ruins. But on my second playthrough, I went directly to get the good swords, the good ashes, and the upgrade materials I needed to increase them, and then I just farmed ruins to increase my level so that the bosses were manageable. I knew where to go, how to fight, and what I needed to do. But there's something else that made my second playthrough a fun experience. During my first run of Elden Ring, I realized that the developers put a lot of things in this game that probably could have been cut. A lot of catacombs have the same bosses, and the game has a lot of recycled content later on. When you're exploring and doing everything, it started to bother me. But on my second playthrough, because I only strictly did what was necessary, a lot of the recycled content didn't rear its ugly head. Sure, you see some of the same enemies over and over again, but only a couple times, really. I fought the Draconic Tree Sentinel twice on my second run, but I saw it a half a dozen times in my first playthrough. That's when I started to think that From Software didn't really want you to explore and do everything in Elden Ring in just one playthrough. It seemed like they designed the game for you to do the main quest, and then you just kind of stumble onto things as you went. Oh, you found an NPC on this run and followed their questline for a bit? That's great. But maybe you shouldn't seek out every NPC and do all their quest lines using a guide. It's just not going to be fun. My first playthrough had me fighting every boss to get every great ruin, whereas my second run, I only sought the ones that I needed, until I really wanted an item to help my build. Morgott and Ranni were first to get your 2 great ruins. Then I did Rickard and Radahn when I wanted the Mimic Tier and the Blasphemous Blade. Since I already knew the layout of those areas and how to fight them, it became a breeze, whereas the first time I played the game, I died dozens of times to each boss.
Greetings, traveler from beyond the fog.
So the question is, why am I making a video about Elden Ring and my experience replaying it? Well, the DLC is coming out in June, Shadow of the Erdtree, and I think a lot of people are going to be thinking about diving back into this game in preparation for it. And some people may think that leveling a new character is going to be too arduous a task for them. But I'm here to tell you that your second playthrough is going to be just fine. It took me 27 hours to start a new game and beat the Elden Beast. And it would have been a lot less except my build sucked, and I kept dying to the Fire Giant and the Elden Beast until I respec'd. If you're worried about replaying the game, don't worry about it. Dive back into the world of Elden Ring and you won't be disappointed. Just pick a goal. Maybe you want a different route this time, or maybe you want to do a magic build instead of a melee build, or get a different ending. Elden Ring is a clear 9 out of 10 game, and I encourage everyone to play it at least once. And that's it for my video. I just wanted to talk a little bit about my experience playing Elden Ring and diving back into it. Thanks for watching, and make sure to leave a like on the video. Let me know down below if you've replayed Elden Ring since release, or if you're looking forward to the DLC Shadow of the Erdtree.
An age of fracture.